Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Safe in Hell from 1931. This continues my quest to review as much of William Wellman's filmography as I possibly can. This is a pre-code Wellman, which I hadn't seen before. One thing about Wellman and the women's pictures he directed, and he directed quite a few for someone who's known for being a tough guy war movie director. Not that they were subjects I think he was maybe interested in, but he was put in that role. But he was always really good at directing actresses playing strong female characters. They were always strong and defiant, but they always knew how to get through something, and you'd have to see them deal with a particular situation. In this, Beggars of Life with Louise Brooks and Barbara Stanwyck in Purchase Price, they were put in situations where they had to adapt and be strong and change with their environment. Dorothy Mackaill also does that in this film. Wellman had a very strong-willed mother who was a parole officer, and you can really see that from his women's pictures. Dorothy Mackaill has this very strong, defiant performance that you get a lot more from a pre-code woman's picture than you did later. Dorothy Mackaill is defiant in a way that almost kind of the way Wellman shot it and the way Wellman's camera is always constantly moving. I mean, for a early talkie pre-code film, the camera's moving quite a bit, and it reminds me of how the camera moves when he was filming James Cagney for Public Enemy, which is also released this year, but was about 3 or 4 films between this and that film. He knew how to play someone who's so defiant and energetic and kind of like a firecracker, much like how Cagney was, Dorothy Mackaill is as well in this film. Dorothy Mackaill, who plays Gilda, who is a prostitute and then is sent to visit a man and just hang out with him for the night, and then she finds it's a guy who fired her and put her into her current job as a prostitute. She's angry, they get into a fight, she knocks him over, it hits a candle, starts a fire, and he passes out, and she leaves the room, and he is believed to have been killed, and so she needs to escape with her longtime boyfriend Carl, played by Donald Cook, and they leave, and she goes to a Caribbean island, Tortuga, which they don't really mention it, they just kind of say it's this island for the most part. I don't remember them mentioning the island, or if they did very briefly. Tortuga, this Caribbean island that has no extradition laws, so she can go there and be safe and not be put to jail. And she stays there in this hotel with all these other crooks who can also not be extradited in this hotel. And she has to slowly adapt to this world while her boyfriend and kind of fiance is going to come back for her. But while she's waiting, she has to deal with all these crooked guys in this hotel and decides to kind of adapt to what's going on rather than hide away from them and try to survive in this Caribbean island. A lot of what Wellman does in here is more evidence of pre-code Wellman and how much more inspired he was to work on more of an assignment picture at this time. I'm fairly certain this was one. He seems to have a lot more fun, particularly with the camera. It feels like he's more into it at this time than I've seen from his later works. One of my favorite uses of the camera, and it's so Wellman, it's ridiculous, is when Gilda is hiding in the ship on her way to Tortuga, and she's in the box and Carl comes around, you only see their lips. It definitely helps the romantic atmosphere of their relationship. Wellman always liked to hide things on frame and let you only see a sliver of it and always conceal things. He liked to play with the audience in that way, which I think shows his kind of playfulness as a director, but it also shows he liked to emphasize a certain thing by doing that, but also hiding other things. I mean, you're only seeing their mouths, but it's a really inspired shot, and he uses the camera in a lot of fun ways where it looks like Gilda is undressing, and then you pan up and you see she's wearing a nightgown. He's really playful with the audience at this time, and the way he's moving his camera around and really showing her, I think it helps with Dorothy Mackayll's performance. It's interesting how good Wellman was at making what was considered a woman's picture at the time and having such defiant women. And when you look at the 30s, I think it's always interesting to see how much more progressive these films were, how you could really be at that time your own woman, and in later films that's not as evidenced. She's very strong-willed. Dorothy Mackaill gets that very well. I mean, I really like this performance, and it's a shame apparently a lot of her films are lost. She retired pretty early. By 37, she was taking care of her ailing mother. She lived in Hawaii, I think, and was in some Hawaii Five-0 episodes. One thing Wellman always talked about when he worked with actresses is the women who want to be all done up and not get their face dirty and want to look pretty all the time would never really work with him. And it seems like Dorothy Mackaill wasn't really interested in that. This woman who was in a terrible situation and had been attacked and her life had been ruined by this man, and she lost her patience with him, understandably. Wellman liked showing working class women who had to be strong-willed, who had to have her wits about her, who had to fight for herself. That was really something Wellman was good at. He really believed in strong work, and he was certainly a workhorse at this time. This was his 5th film in 1931, which, needless to say, is fairly impressive even then. There's 2 African-American actors who are in this film who are actually fairly well known for African-American actors could be in 1931. Nina Mae McKinney and Clarence Muse. They were the only 2 people in the hotel who weren't criminals, who weren't there because of the extradition laws. And apparently in the script, they were asked to speak in dialect, but both didn't speak in a dialect. Supposedly Wellman was the one who changed that because he didn't really like it. I get the impression actually Wellman wasn't that racist from what I've heard from interviews and things. Whether that's a lie or was changed because of how we look at that time in history, I don't know. It might just be because he wanted to avoid cliches and do something different from the film. I don't know, but it is interesting to note he actually did do that. I was kind of surprised by Donald Cook's performance, who is more well known if you've seen Public Enemy as James Cagney's older brother. And in that film, I mean, I almost didn't recognize him, and I was kind of surprised, like his voice sounds different. I just saw Public Enemy again right before, a couple days before I saw this, and I didn't recognize him at all. He's not in it a lot, but he was good at playing the romantic lead. This shows a woman who is far more interested in this, of being a studio director than he would be later. I think later he was less interested in being a studio director, and I think he kind of wanted to do what he wanted to do, but this is when he would get these films to work for him. He would find inventive ways. He would still do the Wellman things in it. When you get to the 40s and you get to films like Thunderbirds or Buffalo Bill, it really felt like they were assignment pictures, and he really didn't try to put very much of his own stamp on them. I was kind of surprised by Safe in Hell. It gets probably closer to Beggars of Life in terms of what's happening to the female protagonist. It is a lot more defiant because of Dorothy Mackaill's performance. I don't think, apparently Stanwyck was considered for this, and I'm sure she would have done a great job, but I think Dorothy Mackaill, you can read so much from her close-ups, how she can go through a range of emotions. Later in the film at the end, when she's smoking in front of those guards, she has more macho-ness in her than you could even fathom, but she can still be very emotional in a scene right before, and she can pull that off very well and not have you question the character's motivation. There's a moment where she's just looking out at the ocean that you can tell like there's a lot on her mind. It's basically all on her to get that through to you, and she does it very well, but you also have gotten that through spending all that time with her. You get the kind of woman and the character she is. Wellman was very good at making sure that got through, but I think also she was very good at making sure that went through as well. And I think Wellman worked really well with a really good performance and a really good actor. I know a lot is written about how him and actors had a very adversary relationship, but I never see that in his films. I think a lot of, especially like this and Public Enemy from the same year, and even things like Other Men's Women, they wouldn't work as well because he's relying on the actors so much. He does have a grittier style, and he does a lot with the camera to get that through, but it wouldn't mean as much without a performance like Dorothy Mackaill. And I think that's kind of what makes this film a little more notable than you'd think. Sometimes I felt it could be a little slow when you're waiting for her, and she's kind of defiantly against changing. That sometimes felt a little slow, but it is a 73-minute film, so it's not that slow. The other actors who play the rogues gallery of guys who live in this hotel are all like great kind of character actors of the time. I'm not as familiar with all of them. This motley crew of prisoners, their chemistry together worked very well. You could tell these guys hung out when they weren't shooting. Wellman, even if they're women's pictures, they're really macho, tough women, and this is one of the tougher women I've seen through one of his films. Wellman's camera and the amount he moves that camera around helps the intensity of Dorothy Mackayll's performance and makes this film, you know, which at the time was not recommended for children, makes it feel a lot more intense, I think, than a lot of films at this time. Wellman liked that intensity, and he liked that immediacy to his films, but he also liked playing with the audience, and I think something like Safe in Hell is a really good example of the period. It shows really what he can do in 1931 and why he was considered such a good pre-code director. So if you have seen Safe in Hell and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And I will have another Wellman review next month. Check out my other 40-some Wellman reviews that I've done thus far, and I hope to see you next time, and thank you for watching.